So we can start now.
And can you see any slides that I'm
Yes, sir.
presenting?
Yeah, we are able to
Okay,
see.
wonderful. So, shall we get started?
Yeah, sure, sure, sir.
Okay, so am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay, and so folks, this is a very strange experience for me because I have not given any talk over video conferencing before, and I actually do not like to give talks. I much prefer to just have a conversation. So, if there are any questions that you have, um, can anybody type a question in the chat box, or is that restricted to a few
So
folks?
chat is open to all.
Okay, so just feel free to speak or chat or whatever is the protocol that the organizers have set up. I don't want to start redefining the protocol, but just feel free to interrupt anytime because it's really not an interruption. It is a conversation, and that is what I would much prefer. Okay, so
So,
let's get rolling. Ji,
so if everyone can switch on the video, and it would be great. It would be more interactive.
I will start. Okay, can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I have no idea what happens to this. Okay, so you're able to see the screens and you're able to see the slides. So let's get rolling. So um, a quick show of hands slash. So I was one of the suggestions made to for the structuring this was to spend a little bit of time just going over my journey and then focusing on how to pitch. I'm happy to skip over the first part and go straight to how to pitch because that might be of more use. The rest is, if that is preferred, we can do that. If you want me to spend 10 minutes on how I got to become an entrepreneur, I can do that with some
We would,
lessons.
like-
Uh,
we would love to hear your journey.
okay, so you asked for it. Okay, so don't complain. Here we go. And so I got to Kanpur in 1984. I suspect that there is nobody in this meeting that was born at that point in time. So that just dates me more than anything else. A lot has changed since then. And so I'm just capturing what worked for me as a student and what are the things that uh, I remember, things that I could have done differently. Um, and by the way, as I'm saying, I did not know these words then. And what do I mean by that? We do a whole bunch of things unconsciously, then only as we kind of grow older, or one of our parents tells us that this is the abstract thing that you are doing, whereas we are happy to keep doing it without knowing. So a lot of these things are post facto, as in I'm now 50 something and I'm looking back and saying, okay, what worked? I didn't know at that point in time. I was just doing whatever I was doing. So some of the things that worked for me in retrospect were the fact that uh, I was very focused when we went to. Is there any student film society any longer, or is that all gone?
Now we have Film Club IIT Kanpur. Now it's called Film Club IIT
And
Kanpur.
okay, and there are any screenings in
Yeah, screening is
of
also
movies
happening.
or
Yeah, we just
okay.
had.
So okay, so then there was no internet. So there was whenever the movie would get screened, that was the big deal because that is all that you would be looking forward to. And especially during ragging time, it was quite a hilarious value proposition because all the freshers would be asked to run up to the screen and give a kiss to whichever person was being shown on the screen and all this kind of jazz. So it was a source of massive entertainment. But anyways, one of the things that worked for me while at Kanpur was that I was usually pretty focused on whatever was going on. If we were at the movies, then it was being present at the movie. If I was working, I was working, and there was very little, uh, did not do more than one thing at a time. That has become harder now just because of the internet, but also it's a skill that I've lost myself. But that was one thing that worked for me. And these others are pretty much all the same point. So I had a blast doing whatever I was doing, including whether it was a bulla session or fatta cricket or volleyball or studying or whatever else it is. It was all a lot of fun. But I do remember that I used to compare myself with others, which was a fairly useless activity because, and I'll come to this in a moment. Um, so those are the memories of the time in IITK, and the thing that I remember most fondly taking away is a set of friends that I continue to be in touch with. It was the same set of 8 people that lived in a wing, and we are still friends. And we stayed in the same wing for at Kanpur for 4 years. So then grad school. Any questions? Shall I keep moving on?
You can keep moving on.
Okay, okay. At grad school, um, the first it was a very traumatic experience for me because I was a good student at Kanpur. I knew how to take exams. Uh, I don't mean this in any boastful manner, but uh, I was among the top few people in the class. And then I got to grad school and I realized that I was a complete idiot because I did not know how to think independently. So, what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example of a course that I took where the course was a 3 month course, but the class met only 3 times, once every month. And when you met in the class, the teacher would just hand you a piece of paper, and I literally mean a piece of paper. And
Mm.
in that piece of paper was written a problem, and you had to go figure out what that problem meant and what are you going to do about that problem. And I was expected to define my own problems. And then I realized that while I had learned how to take exams, I had not learned how to identify problems. And the premium was not on solving questions given to you, it was about just free-formed independent thought. So I struggled for 4 years, was quit, nearly quit multiple times, and other friends convinced me that no, don't leave. And things kind of fell into place after 4 years.
Mm.
And it was a hard 4 years, as you can imagine, not feeling that one is capable of working through the problems, and took another 2 years to graduate, and those were wonderful 2 years. But I'm still very glad I went to grad school, despite the 4 years being extremely painful. I learned how to think more independently. I learned that it is okay to be different. I learned that problem identification is actually very valuable, not just problem solving.
Mm.
The people who identify problems, because then you can get a whole bunch of other people to help solve the problem. But identifying the problem is actually often harder. I made great friends in grad school also. And probably most importantly, I got uh, married to a amazingly wonderful person who was 1 year my senior from IIT Kanpur. But I met her only in grad school, which probably is my single biggest accomplishment uh, out of grad school. So all in all, no regrets, despite the first 4 years being pretty tough. And any questions? Shall we keep moving on?
You can keep moving on, sir.
Okay. Um, joined a job in 1994, left it in a year. Started a second job in 1995, left it in a year. And in both places had a wonderful boss. And the problem was entirely with me because I didn't know what I wanted. So I quit these companies. And then I started a company. And then I realized that my issue with the jobs was that I can't work for anybody else. That company, we had a lot of fun. We got lucky. It was a boom time, got acquired by Amazon. Uh, Reached the same foolish conclusion that I can't work for anybody, so left Amazon also, and uh, a ton of money on the table, and started another company, which is Tawant. The first one was Jungli. And then in 2006, I started a venture fund and moved to Bangalore and lived in Bangalore for 8 years. And from 2006 to 2014, and then moved back to the US in 2014. And I've been here since the last 6 years. So, what are some of the lessons from all of these years? Some areas where I struggled, I was comparing myself to others. That's one of the reasons I left the first two jobs. I was always, and that has changed only recently. It's taken a long time. I would quit too early, uh, was looking for quick results without putting in the hard work. And I did not find somebody that I could use as a sounding board or as a mentor. So some of the lessons, and folks, I'm just sharing the lessons with you, not because these are what will apply to you or that is everybody's experience. This is just my experience. And so please take it for that. So some of the lessons, we are each completely different, so need to stop comparing myself. So for example, when I was at IBM, I had another friend who's also from IT Kanpur, and he was at Oracle, and he was very successful at Oracle. So at one level, I joined Oracle because I felt, hey, Sandeep is kicking ass in Oracle. I would love to go to Oracle because maybe I'll be more successful. I mean, what kind of an idiotic thought process is that? But that is the kind of stuff that happens when you compare yourselves to others. That is not the reason I started a company, by the way, but that this issue has come up in other scenarios. When I was not enjoying myself, instead of figuring out how to make it work and make sure that whatever it is I'm doing, I can have fun, I instead quit. Not a very great way to do things. So while the result was correct, the reasons were wrong, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So some lessons in my mind, there is a single metric of success, just a single metric. And this is talking about professional success. Uh, Personal success is a different issue, which we just talked about a little while ago in the prior call. But professional success, in my mind, there is just one metric. If the people that you are working with will work with you again, you are
Mm.
successful. Okay? Because
Yes.
if you're working with good people, they will work with you only if you've done good work. And if you measure by output, often you fail despite doing your best work. So, in my mind, there is a single metric of success, which is make sure that the people that you worked with want to work with you again. This doesn't come out of maskapatti or giving them or applying makhan, because if you have good people, they will see through all of that. So, this happens only if you do good work. So, in my mind, this is the only metric of success. My recommendations to several of you: stay with the job for at least 2 years. I know I did not, but
Mm.
it's a learning from having done the wrong things. I speak from a moral low ground. A drunk can tell you better what it is like to be drunk than somebody who's never tasted alcohol before. So stay with the job for 2 years at least, because that allows you to develop some credibility and deliver some value. Don't optimize anything for money, because money comes and goes. If you create value, money usually follows. And when you are early in your career, explore different things, because as you go further in your career, you will be given less and less latitude. People expect a 40-year to know what they're doing. People don't expect a 22-year-old to know what they're doing. So you can explore when you're 22. If you start exploring when you're 40, then the cost will be higher. You can still explore, but the cost will be higher. So those are some of the things that come to mind, and we can move on to pitching unless there are any questions.
We can move on. Or, yeah, we can move on, sir.
Okay. So um, pitching. So I have put these slides together with the assumption that you are pitching to raise money. Okay. There are several things, however, that are the same when you're doing any kind of pitching. So everybody has to sell. Children sell. I'm sure you go sell to your parents why they should allow you to go to Goa and why it is good for your health, good for their health, and why it is good to have some kaju feni. It's all selling processes. Children sell to their parents all the way from being toddlers, and it keeps working that way. I'm sure you sell ideas to your teammates or why you should go and have Thai food instead of Mexican, or go to Chungi as opposed to someplace in the city. It's all sales processes. Okay, so you're always selling, and therefore it is very important to know how to sell. And pitching is selling a piece of your company. You're selling a piece of your company to investors who will give you money in return. So, what do? You sell the vision. You get people to believe in the fact that you're building something grand in the future because they are buying a, a place on the bus that you will be driving for many years, going to a destination that everybody believes is grand. So, you're selling a vision. You're selling the team that it's the right people driving the bus, that you will not run the bus into the khadda or into the gorge right next to the road. So you're selling the team and you are selling the problem that you are solving. The solution is less important. It sometimes becomes important if the solution is very hard. Let's say you've come up with a new kind of internal combustion engine which uses only 10% of the fuel. Now the solution becomes more important than the problem. But that is very, very seldom. Okay. More often than not, it's the problem that people are interested in. Um, Uber or Ola cabs, it's a problem. The solution is not what was interesting. It was a new problem that was interesting. So these are the few things that you're selling to investors. And folks, feel free to interrupt at any point in time, okay? Otherwise, I'll keep marching on. So we already talked about this, that people are always selling. Now keep in mind that good salespeople do not sell bullshit. You would have often heard that a good salesperson can sell ice to Eskimos. That is known as a crook. Somebody who sells things that you don't need is not a good salesperson. That person is a cheat. However, people who actually empathize with the needs of the buyer, they are good salespeople. So some of the best salespeople that I have met go and tell their customer that you don't need the solution right now. And you'll be amazed that the customers come back after 2 years to the salesperson and say, I'm ready for your solution. Now will you sell it to me? Okay. So do not sell bullshit. That is not a good salesperson. Sure, that can work once in a while, but that is tantamount to cheating. A good salesperson actually understands the needs of the buyer. So, what does the buyer want to understand? Now, when you want to understand the buyer's needs, there is something that the buyer should understand from you. And here we are talking about the investor. So, what does the investor want to understand? One, they want to understand what problem are you solving. So, let's consider, for example, so there's a company that I'm just talking to. Some of you might actually know this company or not. They build cosmetic products that are halal and therefore okay for folks who are practicing Muslims to buy those products. So the problem being that most products are not halal. They will have alcohol, they will have other things, and my understanding is poor, so I apologize in advance if I'm saying things that are incorrect. But conceptually, uh, halal is what is their basic problem, that they are getting these products that are not halal. And that is the problem that the company is solving. Why am I saying the solution is secondary? Because You can potentially source these products from somewhere else. But the key identification is, aha, here is a problem in the market. You think of TikTok, okay? I have no idea what the hell somebody was thinking when they came up with TikTok. That is a very interesting example of a product which did not have a clear problem as far as most people were concerned. I don't think that the problem is I haven't wasted enough time today or I haven't seen stupid videos today. There are plenty of those, both things one and two. So I can't explain things like TikTok. Okay, those I think fall in the category of experimenting with a bunch of stuff. And then you suddenly find that people start using the product not because they have a problem, but because you have found a human behavior that you can exploit. Gambling is probably one of those things. Gambling sites have a lot of fun, and have a lot of traction. It's not necessarily solving a problem as much as it is addressing a need for excitement, a need for people to have a thrill, and people will waste all their money for that thrill. And TikTok is also something like that. It's not a problem, it's addressing a need. But most often businesses are figuring out what is the problem. Then you got to figure out what are the economics of the problem. How do you how does money move in this problem? So if we come back to, let's say, uh, WhatsApp or TikTok, how does money move in that space? People will make an argument that, hey, after some time, you can start selling products through this solution, and then the money will move from the buyer to the eventual seller, and TikTok will sit in the middle, or WhatsApp will sit in the middle, or advertising that you will show some products and you will make money out of that. So how does the money move is what are interested in figuring out. And also, how large can this become? If millions of people are using it, it can become large, so it works. If only two people are going to use it, then they better pay a lot of money. You've heard of SpaceX. SpaceX is a large market not because there are so many shuttles that are sent up, but because every shuttle is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Whereas Google is an interesting company not because every ad is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but there are trillions of ads. So see, small ad revenue multiplied by trillions or very large revenue multiplied by hundreds, both result in large markets. It would be a problem if you said, I will put ads on shuttles because now you will make only thousands of dollars per every ad and there are only hundreds of shuttles. So that is not a very interesting business to build. Am I making sense? So
Yes, sir.
people will worry about do the economics work? And this, by the way, is a very frequent problem. You find that people fall in love with an idea and they are not able to figure out how to think through the fact that it's really not a very large market. Sure, we all need it. Let's say that the idea is I will figure out how to sell cut bhindi to my mother, only cut bhindi, not the other vegetables, and to everybody's mothers. Now the challenge is that if I sell cut bhindi once a week, maybe I'll make 50 rupees. But to get every customer, it will cost me more money than that. It will cost me more than 50 rupees to deliver that bhindi. So I'm never going to make money. So not only do I need to deliver cut bhindi, I need to deliver cut lauki, cut aloo, cut pyaz. And now suddenly instead of 50 rupees, I can start making 600 rupees per week. And now the economics start working. So think through the economics of the business because do you need to have answers? No. What the investor wants to get comfort around is that you have thought through the problem. Okay? Because if you have all the answers, then clearly you are not early in the business. These answers will emerge with time. So what people are looking for is that you have the ability to think through the problems. Okay? And that comes to the third point. Is this the right team? And that team comes through, can you think through problems? Can you raise money? Can you hire others? Can you grow? These are the kinds of things that you have to convince people for them to believe that you are the right person to give money to. And this needs to come through in the pitch. And how does it come through? Like I explained to you, If you think of the economics, if you can talk people through the economics, they tell you, hey, I don't understand that. And then in the argument, you discover that you're wrong. You admit, hey, I like what you were saying. I will go back and change this. That shows people you can grow. Can you convince three of your friends to join the company? That will convince them that you can hire others. Can you raise money? Make sure you can reach out to 20 people who can invest. That is the only way to demonstrate to others that you can raise money, and then you will attract more money. So those are some elements, and this is something you need to prove to yourself, by the way, because if you cannot raise money, don't become the CEO. Get somebody who can raise money. Otherwise, you will basically die hungry. So not only do you need to prove this to others, make sure you are convinced about it yourself. Okay? Any
Yes.
questions until now, folks, or shall we keep moving?
Uh, if anybody is having any questions, you can type it out on the chat box.
I had one question actually. Can I
Please,
ask?
G.
Okay. The query is like we already do not know that. See, we haven't done it in the past. That can we raise money or
Okay,
not? So,
right.
how do we know that we are capable enough for being a CEO or not? Although we can be
Ah,
striving towards it, but still, this is something that we
G.
haven't done in the past.
Yeah, very good question. So let's say once somebody has raised money in the past, this question becomes easy to answer. Your question is, well, for a first-time entrepreneur, how do you know? Is that fair? Okay. So there are some elements to this. Can you hustle and figure out how to get introductions to five investors? If you can't, chances are you can't raise money. When you talk to these investors, can you get a second meeting? If you can't, chances are you can't raise money. So while you might not have very many positive data points, pay attention to the negative data points. And people will give you benefit of doubt for the positive data points if they see that the trajectory is correct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Huh? So you are people will give you the benefit of doubt. That's interesting. The guy has been able to talk to so many people, or the gal. My guy is a gender neutral term, so please interpret it that way. For me, that is. And this person can hustle to get money. Because keep in mind, if you're not able to raise money, you can't pay the bills and the company will die. That is why it is such an important part of the whole process. Okay. Any other questions? And great question, by the way.
I
Okay.
think we
So
can move
moving
on.
on. Yeah. And feel free to interrupt, guys. Now, some things to keep in mind as you present. And this, by the way, is true not only for your pitch deck. This is true for everything. This is true for me preparing this deck. Understand your audience. Now, let us say after this talk, all of you go away saying कि सब कुछ सर के ऊपर से भी निकल गया. Okay, if somebody doesn't understand Hindi, one of your friends could. It means that we couldn't understand a damn thing. Then I have failed because the point is not to spout profound things. The point is that the audience should walk away with something. If a teacher in one of your lectures, ESC 101 or whatever it is, could be the smartest person on earth, but if the class doesn't understand anything, they have failed as a teacher. So this point, which is audience is king or queen or prince, whatever is the thing, that is very, very important and frequently forgotten. We become so caught up in trying to show that we are smart and we know stuff that we forget that it is the audience that needs to learn at the end of the day. Otherwise, I could sit in my own bedroom and speak to a mirror, and it's exactly the same effect. Okay, so think of your audience, simplify the message. If it is too complicated, it's pointless. So, for example, let us say I was explaining Uber to my mother versus if I'm explaining Uber to a McKinsey consultant. They have very different audiences. To the McKinsey consultant, I can talk about it's a marketplace model and there is efficient pricing that comes about because it is an open market and people compete for the demand and it is a supply side problem, blah, blah, blah. If I'm talking to my mother, I have to explain it in very different terms because my mother, while she is very sophisticated on a bunch of other things, is not sophisticated on economic issues or marketplace models. So with her, I have to tell her, starting from it is an app like WhatsApp, and you can order a taxi. And when you order a taxi, your request of taxi goes to a bunch of taxi drivers. And whoever is closest and whoever is free comes and picks you up. Okay? Very different explanations. In one case, I was going down talking about the marketplace models, blah, blah, blah. In the other case, I was basically explaining what does it do. So simplify the message, keeping your audience in mind. I find that you should prepare your own slides. Why? Because respect and understand your style. We tell stories in different ways. Some people first talk about the team because they feel that once they have familiarized everybody with who they are, now they have established that one-on-one connection and people will now listen to their story. Some other people feel comfortable first telling people what the economics are because they believe that once the audience understands that there is money to be made, now they are willing to talk to you about all the other things. You will discover what is your style. So while there are people like me running around telling you this is what you should do, that is what we should do, discover your own style when you practice with a few different people and then use that. There are also many ways to listen to a story. So keep an eye out on your audience. If you are talking to them about here is the team and you think that they are getting impatient, ask them that would you like to cover some other part of the story first? And then they will tell you, aha, I like to understand the problem first. So hallelujah, you go to the problem slides and then you come back to the team slides. Am I making sense? So you should not just blunder into the conversation and just keep barreling along. So while there are many ways to tell the story, there are many ways to listen to a story. And come back to goal number one, you have to make sure that the audience understands your message. The deck needs to be multi-level because some people understand more, in which case jump the slides and go deeper. By the way, keep in mind, even though I've written the first 10 minutes are key, I should have written okay. So for the first 10 minutes, you have gotten your audience's attention for the next 10 minutes. In the next 10 minutes, you have the audience's attention for the next 10 minutes. If you lose them in the first 10 minutes, you are done. It doesn't matter if you have an hour. They will stop paying attention. They'll be playing with their phone. They'll be thinking about their boyfriend. They'll be thinking about whatever else their commitments are in the evening. You are done. So please keep in mind that you literally are buying 10 minutes at a time and therefore keep your audience engaged. And practice with friends who give you harsh feedback because it is better to get abused by your friends and fix the problems than to show up in the party half naked when everybody will not even tell you that you're missing your pants. Your friends will. So learn from your friends. Okay, here we are. Multiple questions. I will jump to the questions. Something about the problem being important and the solution. But the problem that Ola Cab tried to solve was already solved by Uber. So what made people invest in them? Great point. That is one of the scenarios where the problem was still sold as this is the most important problem to a bunch of people here. So it wasn't a new problem, but the problem was sold in a new geography. The solution, by the way, was discovered by the company only over time. So, am I making sense? What people bought into was that the problem is important. So, Bhavesh's genius was not that the solution was fantastic, but that he was among the first people to say, I will solve this problem, even though the problem is known in the US, I will solve this problem in India. So, taking the problem and bringing it to India, as opposed to taking the solution and bringing it to India. The solution was discovered and is still being discovered as to how do you get the taxi drivers lined up? How do you make sure you can buy supply and so on and so forth? People bought into it because they felt this is a good problem to solve. And that is what I mean. It need not necessarily be just the definition of the problem. It is a combination of the problem in the geography with a certain nuance and so on and so forth. Okay. In addition to what Uday is asking, if problems are important than solution, then why do most investors look for the startup that has a certain traction? Great point. Because they want to figure out that, yes, I believe in the problem. And now I also want the solution. Investors would like to have everything. So they want the thing de-risked. So let's look at TikTok. With consumer ideas, just the description of the need or the problem does not work out. So it changes by space, by the way. When I say the problem is most important, please keep in mind that even that will not always apply. So, for example, as I mentioned to you with TikTok, it is very hard to say what is the problem. There, somebody discovered a particular behavior that everybody latches onto. So, with consumer plays, you will find that most people want to see traction, because in consumer plays, it is very hard to say what will millions of people do. You can say what 20 people will do, you can say what 200 people will do, but that is still not a good example or a good answer to what will hundreds of people do, what will millions of people do, which is why people look for solution in consumer plays. In enterprise plays, you can talk to three people and say, this is the right problem to be solving. And by the way, when I say think of the right problem, the line between the two is sometimes the solution is often exactly what am I going to do to solve the problem. Whereas the problem itself is enterprise sales solutions can be made better. And you will find that in enterprise solutions, that is sufficient. In consumer solutions, without traction, it's very hard to say whether you have. So your point is very well taken. In consumer plays, without traction, people will not give you money because they don't know. When I say people, I mean large amounts of money. Because while they will resonate with the problem, they don't know whether the solution works for millions and millions of people. So your point is very well taken. In consumer plays, it is problem plus solution. In enterprise plays, it is mostly problem that is good enough. VCs are relatively easy to find. How to find angel investors to invest in pre-traction? Don't have much money to support themselves for a long time. So by the way, even VCs are not very easy to find, because if you believe that VCs are easy to find and they are easy for you, that is a very good validation of your fundraising skills. Because what it means is that you can convince people to take meetings. And VCs are busy people. They have a bunch of people coming to them with ideas. If you can find that one mutual friend who introduces you to VCs, it is good because it validates that you have good fundraising skills. You will find angels also equally easily, as easily as you would find VCs, because they can all be found using the same public sources. How to get them to invest is a very different ballgame. And I don't have an answer for you. I wish I knew how to raise money across all things. That is a combination of all of the things that we've been talking about, telling your story, getting them convinced that you are the right person. Angels will invest in people even more than, clearly there is no solution by them, which by the way comes back to why the problem is more interesting. You will have to tell them, here is the problem that I'm solving, and here is me. And then you spend time talking about you, the problem, how you're going to approach it, blah, 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 blah. You are in effect selling yourself. They have to believe that you are the right person. How does one do it? I wish I had a formula, but it is a matter of conversation, getting them convinced that you're the right person, and that is how you will end up raising that money. The fact that you don't have that much time, I wish I could tell you that there is a ready-made solution, but that is unfortunately one of the Darwin's principles that get applied, where somebody who can't solve this problem, by definition, turns out not to be a good investment. And conversely, somebody who can solve this problem turns out to be a good investment because they will then solve similar problems that will keep showing up repeatedly. So I wish I could give you a better answer, but this is unfortunately part of the qualification process that may the strongest survive. When is the right time to approach investors? It varies from idea to idea, space to space, and person to person. So let us say you were building an e-commerce company. You cannot start an e-commerce company without a whole bunch of money. So the right time to approach investors is well before you have any evidence of anything. You can't have a solution. So you start talking to investors right away. And then you have to convince them that your particular slant is the right one. Either you are highly qualified to solve this problem differently, everybody else is selling sabji, you are going to sell drugs, everybody else is selling drugs, you're going to sell cars, something different. Or you're going to build a community selling site like Misho, some angle. Okay. Well, actually, Misho is not necessarily a pure e-commerce company that can start with less amounts of money. So I'm talking of companies that can only start with a large amount of money. Let's say you're building a car company. You cannot start without lots of money. On the other hand, let us say you are starting a TikTok competitor. Three people can get together, hack out an application, put it out there on the app store, and see if people start getting usage. You can also go out and talk to friends, families, and fool people who cannot say no to you because of relationship and start building out stuff. And once you have traction, then you go raise money from the next kinds of investors. So I hope that gives you some visibility. It changes depending upon the kind of company, and it also changes upon what is needed next. Let us say you have a lot of traction, but you want to grow much faster. You go raise money if that is what is needed. So there is no one right time. Think of the problem. By the way, in most cases with startups or most problems in life, there is no one answer. Even though we like to pretend that here is some gyan, the bottom line is there are multiple answers. And as you talk to people like me, it is the context of the problem that changes things. Just like it was okay for uh, in Mahabharata, the Ashwatthama Hatohate, the context makes that lies okay, even though in most contexts people are told don't lie. Here, similarly, the context changes the answer. So I hope that gives you some color on how to think about this problem as opposed to an answer. How could we identify ourselves as fit for solving the problem? By trying to solve the problem and being intellectually honest with yourself. And this is a double-edged sword. If you doubt yourself too much, you will never move forward. So you have to have confidence in yourself while being willing to listen to others. So this is a self-fulfilling prophecy in either way. So I have absolutely no way to answer your question other than telling you, try it out. And just as you have already solved several hard problems, you would have answered that question, how do you identify yourself as fit for sitting for the JEE? It is equally relevant as this question. And you will know the answer as opposed to anybody else because there is no formula. Do not believe anybody else. Only believe yourself on this one. As an investor, can you share some anecdotes of companies with some very creative, unconventional ways of pitching? This is a very cool question. One, there was a company that would send samples of their product and they would invite the investors to try it out. Okay. One other company, which also had a fairly interesting way of pitching, is they would reach out to investors and not talk to them about raising money, but they would talk to them about becoming a customer. And people would be intrigued enough that they would start figuring out, what are you raising money for? So there are some examples that I can think of. They're usually very few and far between because most people want to get to the point, but these are two that come to mind. It also does not work for a lot of different uh, areas. Like for example, you can't send samples of most products, but you could for this one company. Can you comment on how to decide between bootstrapping and raising VC, as in what would be better for the venture? This question is similar to the previous one, which is when to raise money. It depends upon the particular idea. Uh, a lot of people will tell you that you should always raise VC money. That also depends upon the idea. It is sometimes okay to build a smaller business as long as you raise sufficient money. And it will really depend upon the particular idea. So my apologies, I can't give you a more precise answer than this. How to give equity to founding team members? There are 7, 8 people, some people working for free, some people are taking money from founders. So if the people are kind of equal levels, then so highest order bid, whatever you do, be upfront and honest about it. Don't try and pull stunts by justifying things that you cannot justify. For example, let us say one person is the better salesperson, and if he or she is trying to justify to the others by some fancy arguments, that will always leave bad blood. Being equal often turns out to be a very good approach. Now, what you're calling out here, some people are working for free, some others are taking money from the founders, from the founder. You can take an approach of saying the founder is investing money into the company. So we will create two types of notional / logical types of shares. One is the shares that we are all getting for our work. There we will be equal. But then there is another set of shares which we will give to this founder or these two founders because she's putting in money. And for that, we will give her separate shares. Am I making sense? You've broken the problem up into two pieces. You are equal as far as sweat equity is concerned, but then one person will get some more equity because of money. And that becomes a logical way to go about it. I am personally a fan of, as far as possible, being equal if indeed all the sacrifices are somewhat similar. Let us say somebody comes in a year later, they get far less equity because a lot of risk has been reduced. So with time, equity reduces very strongly. But otherwise, with skills or seniority or stuff like that, even when people start at the same time, I'm not a big fan of having very different equities. But if somebody is putting in money and somebody is not, then I would give them more equity for their money by coming up with some valuation for the company and attaching a price for that money. If investors investing in our company, does it mean that they are buying shares of the company or lending money? They are buying shares in your company 9 times out of 10. Lending money is very dangerous because it is a very high risk venture. You often borrow money if you have a house because that house retains its value, but a startup has no value if it dies. So be very careful about borrowing money. 99% of the times you want investors to buy shares in your company. Okay. Any questions? More questions? Please keep them coming. This question is a digression. Could you give some advice upon a career in the VC industry? So a career in the VC industry is, in my mind, definitely something if you want to try it out early. It is very fun on certain dimensions and it is very dangerous on certain other dimensions. So I think you should do it only if you really, really like it after you have tried it. So why is it dangerous? VCs get paid more than, in my view, they should. So your habits get spoiled. VCs also are given more respect than they should. Why? Because they control the checkbook. So several of them start believing that they know more than they actually do. So if a young person who is 25 years old starts earning more money than most 25 years old, starts believing they are smarter than most other people, and is not really learning any practical skill, if that person turns out to be a failed VC by the time they are 30 years old, they are pretty much useless. So, a early VC career is very dangerous for that reason. Try it out for a couple of years. And if you absolutely fall in love, sure, do it, because everything that is loved should be done. But if you're doing it for career building reasons after having tried it out, be aware of the risks, that it is a very high risk career because you could turn out to be a terrible VC. But by the time you learn that, several years have passed, you developed bad habits, you developed arrogance and ego because you think you are smart, but it was the money that was talking, not you. And you have really not developed any useful skills. You're not developing product, you're not doing sales, you're not doing marketing, you are a money manager. And a bad money manager who's out of a job at the age of 32 is a pathetic sight. So I am personally a bigger fan for doing some operating jobs and then going to VC. But I'm also okay personally saying that try it out. And if you absolutely fall in love, then do it. Otherwise, go take an operating career. How to decide when to quit/pivot on your idea? Very, very hard question to answer and very contextual. I can tell you not when to decide, but how to be in a position so that you can decide. Make sure you keep talking to customers to find out why are they buying your product. Okay, not only why are they not buying your product, but why are they buying your product? Because if, for example, you cannot get a good answer to why you're buying your product, you know that you're just being lucky. You have to solve the problem. So that is one example. Let us say that you are getting nobody to invest in your company. Very good giveaway. So external input is a very good way to figure out whether you are barking up the wrong tree. Listen to people, you can still decide that you don't agree with them, but keep getting that input and keep getting it with honesty. And maybe you will find out when you should pivot. It is usually tied to not getting traction, but there are so many reasons why you don't get traction that it is very hard for me to say that as soon as you're not getting traction, you should pivot. So I'm hesitant to give you a formulaic answer on this. It is very contextual, and I'm happy to try and be a sounding board on when to pivot. But I would say use other people's help because there is a fine line between persistence and stupidly staying on something for too long. Should we approach the investors directly? I did not understand this. Should we directly approach the investors individually or the firms who connect us to the investors after listening to the pitch? So, Arnav, or Arjiv, sorry, I will request you to reframe this question because the firm is nothing more than people. So I don't understand what you mean by approaching the firms. So I'll keep marching down and hopefully you can enlighten me. How do we get into it and prereqs to get into that industry? You're talking of the venture industry. Uh, I'm assuming Saksham. Um, how do we get into the venture industry? Um, I think, like you get into any industry at this point in time, you interview for positions and see if they give you an analyst job at this point in time. Uh, make friends in the venture industry who can give you more specific advice as to what kinds of people are being hired and which firms are hiring. But it would be an analyst job where you call up people and tell them, I'm very interested. Look, this is what I follow. How you apply for any job. you show people interest by showing knowledge in the space, uh, and applying for positions. If I'm alone to work for a problem for a startup, should I first work through a problem and find a solution, or form a team and make work together? As a lot of startups, customers are to be checked before working on a problem. So I would usually recommend that get a couple of people, because being a solo founder is very, very lonely and very hard. Most of us tend to get stuck in a hole because there is not somebody else to talk to, and it requires a crazy amount of energy. So my recommendation would be first find somebody else also. That will also tell you whether you are capable of recruiting other people. And that is a very important test. So that is my recommendation. Are there single founder companies? The answer is yes. But then people survive when they fall off a building which is 10 floor highs. That doesn't mean you should jump out of 10 floor high buildings. So my bias would be find a co-founder. What are the qualities I should look for in investors other than the money? A great question. Chemistry, that you can work with them. There is no one particular kind of good investor. There are rude investors, there are direct investors, there are polite investors. You should look for people that you think you can work with. You should look for investors who ask you hard questions, because if they don't ask you hard questions, then who's going to push you? And you could be doing goofy things and nobody is going to push you to do the right things. So look for investors that ask you hard questions. Do reference checking. Find out what is their reputation. If their reputation is that they're assholes, think through it. Because what are people telling you? Why are they assholes? Is it because they ask hard questions? In which case, it is wonderful. Is it because they cheat their people that they work with? In which case, it is terrible news. So do reference checking. But look for chemistry, because these are people that you will be working with. So you should be able to work with them. Okay, so I am talking about those firms who are people who do not invest themselves, but help you. Okay, bankers. Okay, so you are talking of bankers as compared to investors. Is that correct, Arjun? These are brokers slash bankers, just like somebody sells a house, and then there are people who connect you to people who sell houses. Okay, both. Talk to bankers. Don't sign up a banker. But in India, using a banker is perfectly reasonable. And bankers can get you in front of other people also. In the US, signing up a banker is a terrible idea because bankers don't work with early stage companies. But in India, bankers work with both early and late stage companies. Why are we using this app instead of Zoom or other apps? I have no idea. So you might not get a banker, but if you can, for early stage companies, it's very hard to get a banker because they don't make enough money. A banker takes a percentage of what you raise. If you only raise 2 crores, a banker will get 4 lakhs, and that is not worth their time. So you might find that early stage companies, you have to hustle yourself and get to angels and get to investors because bankers don't make enough money. When you become a later stage company, bankers make enough money and they'll be willing to come on board. But if you can get a banker, do so. Again, reference check. Okay. And some other points, or we can wrap up whenever I will rely on one of you to blow the whistle.
So
more
we can
digression.
continue. We can continue with the sessions, and in the end, we'll take more questions. If there are.
So, there is one more question. I can answer that. Why did you choose academia and first, and what made you leave academics for industry? So, I chose to go get a PhD because, as I mentioned, I was not very good at independent thought. And when I graduated from IIT, the best thing anybody could do was to go abroad on a scholarship. 70-80% of the people went abroad. Jobs were fairly pathetic. My two choices were to go to IIM Ahmedabad or to go abroad. Most people went abroad. I was not independent minded enough to think through the pros and cons, so I also went abroad. So I went into academics more because my seniors had gone into academics. Industry, I went because after getting a PhD, I didn't want to teach. That much I knew. So I did not go into academia as a profession, and therefore I ended up in the industry. And I can interpret your question as what made me leave research, because my first job was a research job. That is because I was just confused about what is going to make me happy. And I discovered the answer when I accidentally started a company, that I'm much happier being an entrepreneur. It was an accident, not a conscious. I started my first company because I was sick of the job and therefore just started running around trying to raise money for an idea that I had, and fortunately managed to gather some other people around myself, and we collectively raised money. But I was the person who was most dissatisfied with my lot in life. So I went down that path because I was lost rather than because I knew what I was doing. So I'm an accidental entrepreneur, which I wish I could tell you some lesson from that, but uh, there isn't one. Okay. When you are attending meetings, it's good to have two people, because you often stop listening when one is talking. So, and two people listen to questions very differently. I don't have any idea about government schemes also, guys. So sorry about that. And by the way, keep in mind that the responsibility for the people who are listening to you is yours. We often come out of talks, we often come out of meetings, say, everybody in that room was an idiot. They did not understand anything. So, for example, after this conversation, if you all go away without having any value added for the hour that you have spent, it is my problem. It is not your problem. It is not that you all do not know enough to understand what I'm saying. It is my problem. I did not think of who and what and how knowledgeable you are. I did not keep into consideration that you are in your late teens, early 20s, and it is my problem, not yours. Okay? So keep that in mind. And I will come to the questions in a moment. Also keep in mind that the person that you are talking to needs to further sell the ideas. It is never the case that the person you are talking to will go make a decision on their own. Maybe they need to go talk to their husband and tell them that, hey, darling, I'm planning to make this investment. What do you think? Or maybe they need to go talk to their partners, because if you spoke to an investment firm, you probably spoke to one person before. There are 6 other people at the back. What does that mean? That they really need to understand what you're saying. And they need to understand it in simple enough terms that when you, for example, go back to your hostel and you talk to friends, you should be able to tell your friends, hey, this is what I learned. If you walk away saying, I think I've learned something, but you're not able to repeat it, then I have not done a good enough job, which in this case might still be okay, but not when you're raising money. I also personally believe that you should not ignore anyone in the audience. A lot of us have a habit of just talking to the senior most person. Okay, talk to everybody, not just the senior most person. And don't be afraid to say, I don't know, and don't be afraid to ask questions, which is, can you tell me why did you all find this interesting? Or can you tell me why did you not find it interesting? Have that conversation. And I will come back to qualify in a moment. Let's deal with some questions. Government schemes, I don't know. What are some books you would recommend for inspiration or motivation on entrepreneurship? One is the book by Horowitz, The Hard Things About Hard Things. I think that is an excellent book to read. I, by the way, don't read that many books because I find that often books repeat the same thing again and again and again. So I think finding articles, especially for the space that you are in, would be more interesting. So probably the one recommendation I would have is The Hard Things About Hard Things. I personally also like books on just simplification because often entrepreneurship is more about finding your way as opposed to following somebody else's way. So while you might read books, please don't try and copy what the book says. work for them. Keep it as guidance in the back of your head, but then discover your own way. Why isn't defense a big industry in India? Because there is hardly any industry. Defense, by the way, is a very big industry in India. It is just not big in the startup sector. There are plenty of private people who make bucket loads of money, but that's the same reason why there are a lot of other government sectors where it is very hard for startups to enter. Startups can't enter that easily into a number of protected sectors. Look at simple things like transportation. You can't start buses of a certain kind unless you get the government's industry. So it is a lot about protectionism. And defense is absolutely one of those, where the buying cycle is so crazy because there is only one buyer. And by the way, defense industry problems are true throughout the world because the people in the defense process, the buying process is very, very convoluted. And when you have only one buyer, namely the army, you got to figure out how to crack that buyer before you can start a company. Most companies are much easier when you have multiple buyers. If you have only one buyer, it is a very hard business to break into because it is less interesting whether you have an important product or an interesting product or an interesting problem to solve. It is more important whether you have the relationships lined up even before you have the product, if I'm making any sense, because you will finally get stuck on that one thing. So what will it take to enter that kind of an industry? You first build relationships in the defense industry. That means you better be working for many years. You can't do that as a student. You figure out what is the problem to which they need a solution, and then you go build that solution for them. And that could be one way to enter the defense industry. Now, please treat this with a grain of salt because I have never built anything in the defense industry. But this is how I would go about breaking into an industry like defense, which is to first become an insider and then go outside. Okay? And hopefully this also illustrates the fact that there are different ways of breaking into different industries. No, there are no defense industry VCs. And part of it is because it is not an efficient market. But the other challenge also is keep in mind that the number of people who will acquire these companies in India, it's totally unclear. Suppose you build a better weapon or you solve a security problem for defense, who's going to buy that company? So in India, even an exit in this space would be very hard. In the US, there are people who build on subcontracting basis solutions that are then bought by large companies that service the defense industry. Small companies very seldom service the defense industry. That's happening more in the data processing space, by the way. Data analytics, there are people who service the defense industry because the old companies are not able to service that need. And that opportunity might show up in India also. So, but I would still say first build insider connections or hire somebody who has insider connections and then figure out exactly what problem to solve because you still have only one buyer. And therefore, you need to figure out what is their problem because there is no other way to sell to that buyer. Okay. So it is a lot about common sense, by the way. The whole startup process. So don't put too much emphasis into, oh my God, somebody has a business degree and therefore they understand. No. Put yourself in the shoes of what a customer might want, and you will be as capable of understanding it as somebody who's done an MBA. So most of these things are problem-solving skills. They are not specialized instruction. If you want to build a nuclear reactor, yes, you need 20 years of training. If you want to build a car, yes, you need an education in mechanical engineering. Most business problems don't need advanced degrees. They are common sense problems. As long as you're willing to be honest, talk to people, listen to the customer, and get advice from people who've been around. You too can do it without having to go get advanced degrees. For investor conversations, follow up. Follow up, follow up, follow up. It is the most important part of most of these meetings. Without follow up, one is just being lazy. Also, ask the investor, what are the next steps? Because if there are no next steps, you are stuck. If the investor has some homework to do in terms of telling you what are the next steps, now you have a way to go back to them. Okay, let's say that you wanted to get the attention of somebody. You said hello, and there was no excuse that you put in place for the next follow-up conversation. It becomes very awkward. Now, how do I call this person again? It puts me in a position of weakness. Whereas if there was a conversation, do you like to read? Yes, there is this wonderful book that I would love to tell you about as soon as I figure out the name. Now you have left an opening by which to follow up. That is exactly the case with investors. Leave an opening for the next conversation. Ideally, something that they have to do, otherwise, something that you want to do. Also, prioritize them. Some people will be more interested, spend time with them. Other people that might not be interested, spend less time with them. And qualify. This will look strange to you, by the way. But here you are trying to figure out, does this VC have money? Is this the right person? Let's consider the defense example that we were talking about. Let's say you've got a great idea for a security solution for nighttime installations. Every army complex and police complex should have it. But let us say you are talking to an investor who invests in Big Basket, LiveSpace, Zomato, and Policy Bazaar. Is this the investor you should be talking to? They have never invested in a security company, let alone a defense security company. So they are not the right person. You should find out, do they have cash? Let's say you come to me and you tell me, hey, I want to talk to you about this idea. I'm happy to talk to you about the idea. You should find out, how much cash do I have? So these are some of the things to keep in mind. And by the way, right person is also in the organization. For example, let us say you are talking to the receptionist. The receptionist does not make investment decisions, so there's no point in spending time with the receptionist. Let us say you're talking to the analyst. Figure out how to move up from the analyst, because the analyst might be an entry point, but is definitely not the decision maker. Okay? So folks, we are at the end. I can keep rambling on non-related topics, or if you have other questions, we can go there. Also happy to wrap up.
It might be getting very late for you, sir. So thank you so much for your insightful words and for answering all our queries. All of us present here had a great time and got a lot to learn from you. So we appreciate you making time for out of your busy schedule to talk to us. And can you please share your presentation over the mail for our reference?
I will absolutely do that. And also, please keep in mind, these are just a set of opinions. Listen to them, process them, remember them, but don't treat them as quote unquote the truth. Okay? Because it is just my experience that I'm sharing with you. And you will get other people's experiences also. Combine it all to build your own path.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you again. Have a great day ahead.
Okay?
We can.
Take care,
Yeah.
folks. Good night.
Take care, sir.
Okay, bye. And Ashish, yes, patents are important. Okay? Take care, folks. Bye.